I have given this clinic $4 million. I will shut this entire floor down before your next shift starts.
Sir, please take a number.
I don't take numbers. I need someone to look at my finger now!
That is a paper cut.
I am aware of what it is.
We have plasters at the front desk. Free of charge.
Get me a doctor.
Our doctors are with patients.
I'm a patient.
You have a paper cut, sir.
Do you know who I am?
I know you have a paper cut. And I know we have a waiting room full of women who are growing human beings and need actual medical attention. You are welcome to sit down. Number 47 is next. What number did you take?
I have given this clinic $4 million.
4
million. I will shut this entire floor down before your next shift starts. The man saying this had a paper cut, not a deep one, not a medical emergency. A paper cut from the edge of a manila envelope that had caught his index finger while he was signing documents in the conference room upstairs, where the clinic's board meeting had just ended. His name was Daniel Sho, 51 years old, the kind of wealthy that came with a permanent expression of mild disappointment in everything around him. He ran the largest private healthcare investment group in the region, and the Beihai Prenatal Care Center was one of 14 facilities his company had poured money into over the last 3 years. He walked into the ground floor waiting room expecting the treatment that $4 million usually bought. Immediate attention, visible deference, the quiet performance of people who understood that his discomfort was more important than whatever else was happening. What he found instead was a waiting room full of pregnant women, 2 nurses behind a reception desk, and a receptionist named Annie Fong, 63 years old, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, a thermos of tea she refilled 4 times a day, and a personality that could be described generously as fully expressed. "Sir," Auntie Fong said, without looking up from her computer screen, "please take a number." Daniel looked at the ticket dispenser on the counter, looked at Auntie Fong, looked back at the dispenser. "I don't take numbers," he said. "I need someone to look at my finger. Now." Auntie Fong finally looked up. She examined his finger from across the counter with a clinical detachment of a woman who had seen actual medical emergencies and did not consider this one. "That," she said, "is a paper cut. I am aware of what it is. We have plasters at the front desk." She opened a drawer, produced a single bandage, and slid it across the counter. "Free of charge. Have a blessed day." Daniel stared at the plaster. His face darkened in the way of a man who had not been handed a bandage and dismissed in longer than he could remember. "Get me a doctor," he said. "Our doctors are with patients." "I'm a patient. You have a paper cut, sir. Do you know who I am?" Auntie Fong folded her hands on the desk. "I know you have a paper cut," she said pleasantly, "and I know we have a waiting room full of women who are growing human beings and need actual medical attention. You are welcome to sit down." She pointed at the chairs. "Number 47 is next. What number did you take?" He did not take a number. He went and found the clinic manager instead, a nervous young man named Deputy Director Kai who had known about Daniel Sho's investment long enough to understand immediately that this situation required the performance of deep, sincere concern regardless of his personal feelings about it. Kai brought Daniel back to the waiting room personally, moving with the energy of a man defusing something. "Mr. Sho, I am so sorry for the confusion. Our best nurse is right here. She will see to you immediately." The nurse Kai pointed at was Mercy. Mercy, 32 years old, Nigerian-American, 7 months pregnant with a baby she had spent 4 years and every quiet prayer she owned trying to have, was in the middle of checking the blood pressure of a patient in the waiting room. She was precise, gentle, focused, her stethoscope around her neck and her tablet in one hand, moving with the calm efficiency of a woman who is excellent at her job. She looked up when Kai said her name. She looked at the man beside him. At the man's expression, the particular entitled impatience of someone who had already decided she was there to serve him specifically. She looked at the paper cut. "One moment," she said, and finished what she was doing for her actual patient first. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't have a moment. The woman whose blood pressure I'm taking doesn't have a moment either. Mercy said, without looking up. She's 34 weeks. You have a paper cut. She wins. Auntie Fong, behind her desk, reached slowly for her thermos and took a long, satisfied sip. That was when Chidinma arrived. Chidinma, Mercy's best friend, fellow patient at the clinic, 30 weeks pregnant and 5 feet 2 inches of zero tolerance for anything she considered nonsense, had been in the bathroom when the confrontation started. She came out to find Daniel Shou standing over her best friend with his voice rising and Deputy Director Kai looking at the floor and the entire waiting room frozen. "Excuse me," Chidinma said, walking directly into the situation without slowing down. "Is this man bothering you?" "I am addressing a member of staff," Daniel started. "You are addressing a pregnant nurse who is doing her job," Chidinma said, placing herself squarely between Daniel and Mercy with the confidence of a woman who had 3 older brothers and had never once backed down from anything in her life. "And unless your paper cut is somehow also pregnant, I suggest you go sit down and wait your turn like every single other person in this room." The waiting room held its breath. Auntie Fong set her thermos down. Daniel looked at Chidinma the way he had looked at Mercy, like furniture that had inconveniently started talking, and then he said the thing that changed everything. "They let anyone in here now," he said, looking between Mercy and Chidinma slowly, deliberately. "Black women, pregnant by who knows who, taking up space in a facility I built. You're both lucky you're even allowed through those doors. You should be grateful, not mouthy." The room went so quiet the monitors in the back seemed louder. Chidinma stepped forward. Daniel Shou raised his hand and shoved her, one sharp, open-palmed shove to her shoulder, hard enough to knock her backward into Mercy, who caught her by the arms, both of them stumbling. Mercy's back hit the edge of the reception desk. The pain was immediate, sharp and radiating, the kind that came from impact with a hard corner when you were 7 months pregnant and your center of gravity was already shifted. Her hand flew to her stomach instinctively. Auntie Fong stood up. Not dramatically, not loudly. She simply stood up, walked around the desk with her reading glasses still on their chain, and said in a voice that had dropped to something nobody in that waiting room had heard from her before, "Somebody call security. And somebody else call her husband." The clinic's emergency contact system reached Rue Jinza at 2:17 p.m. He was in a meeting, the kind of meeting where people did not interrupt him, where phones were left outside the room, where his assistant knew better than to knock unless the city was on fire. His assistant knocked. Jinza looked up. "Sir." His assistant's face was the color of bad news. "The prenatal clinic called. There's been an incident." Mrs. Mercy was, he stopped, visibly choosing words. "She was hurt. She's asking for you." The meeting ended in under 4 seconds. In the car, his deputy made one mistake. He tried to explain the full situation. The man, the investment, the clinic's board connection, and used the phrase, "it's complicated," to describe why Daniel Shou was still in the building rather than already in police custody. Jinza looked at him once. "Call ahead," he said quietly. "Tell them to make sure he stays in that building." His deputy looked at the expression on his employer's face and made the call immediately, then spent the rest of the ride studying the window. Jinza walked into the Beihai Prenatal Care Center at 2:34 p.m. The automatic doors opened, and he came through them the way weather arrived, not announcing itself, simply there, already fully present before anyone had processed what was happening. He found Mercy in the assessment room, a nurse checking her vitals, one hand resting on her stomach. The redness at her lower back, where she'd hit the desk, was already being documented. Chidinma sat beside her, jaw set, arms crossed. He crossed the room and crouched in front of Mercy and looked at her face first, then her stomach, then her face again. "Are you in pain?" he asked. "I'm okay," she said. "The baby's okay. They already checked." He looked at her for a long moment. This woman he had sat on a bathroom floor with at 6 in the morning. This woman whose hands had shaken so hard when she finally got the positive result that he had wrapped both his hands around hers to steady them. This woman who was 7 months pregnant after they searched for a child for 4 years. He pressed his forehead against hers and closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then he stood up. "Where is he?" he asked the room. Annie Fong appeared in the doorway with her reading glasses and her thermos, and the expression of a woman who had been waiting for exactly this question. "Room 204, she said. Deputy Director Kai is trying to keep him calm. "It's not going well." "Good," Jinza said. He found Daniel Shou in the clinic manager's office, standing with his arms crossed while Deputy Director Kai made placating sounds and 3 security guards stood near the door trying to look like they were there for anyone's protection other than Daniel's. Daniel saw Jinza walk in and did what entitled men always did when they saw someone who didn't immediately communicate obvious power. He assessed him, found nothing threatening in the plain dark coat and quiet expression, and decided this was another person he outranked. "Are you the husband?" Daniel said. "Good. Control your wife. She was obstructing a donor's access to care, and your friend assaulted me when I defended myself." Jinza stood in the doorway and looked at him. "I want to make something clear to you," he said, in the same quiet, precise voice he used for everything that mattered to him, before this conversation continues. "My wife has been trying to have a child for 4 years. She found out she was pregnant 11 weeks ago. She has spent this entire pregnancy working in this clinic, taking care of patients, doing a job she loves. Today she came in for a routine check." He paused. "And you put your hands on her." She was being difficult. "You put your hands on my pregnant wife," Jinza said. "Not louder, just clearer. The way you state a fact that requires no argument. That sentence is the only one in this room that matters." Daniel's lawyer instincts kicked in. "I have donated $4 million to this facility. I am on the board. You have no idea who you're." "You donated $4 million, Jinza said, to a facility that I purchased 8 months ago." The room stopped. Daniel's mouth stayed open but produced nothing. Jinza reached into his jacket and placed a single document on Deputy Director Kai's desk. Kai looked at it, looked at Jinza, and sat down very slowly in his chair. "The acquisition was finalized in February," Jinza continued. Quietly. "I don't find announcements useful." He looked at Daniel. "Your $4 million is appreciated. It funded the new ultrasound equipment on the 3rd floor. The machine that checked my wife's stomach an hour ago and confirmed our daughter is unhurt. I'm glad your money could do that at least." Chidinma, who had followed everyone to the doorway with her arms still crossed, turned to Auntie Fong beside her. "I need to sit down," Chidinma said. "I brought a chair," Auntie Fong said, producing one from nowhere, entirely unbothered. The police arrived at 3:15 p.m. Not because Jinza called them dramatically, because he had called them from the car at 2:33 p.m., before he even walked through the clinic doors, and given them everything they needed, the security footage, the witness statements. Annie Fong had already begun collecting the moment Daniel's hand made contact with Chidinma's shoulder, and Daniel Shou's full name spelled correctly, which his assistant had provided in under 40 seconds. Daniel was arrested in the clinic manager's office. The handcuffs went on while he was still trying to explain the $4 million to officers who had already seen the footage. "This is insane," he said, as they walked him through the waiting room. "I am a major donor. I sit on the board. You cannot do this to me." Every pregnant woman in the waiting room watched him go. Auntie Fong watched from behind her desk, thermos in hand. "Take a number next time," she said as he passed. The charges were filed that evening. Assault, battery, racially aggravated harassment. The security footage was 47 minutes long and left nothing open to interpretation. Daniel Shou's legal team arrived the next morning with the energy of people who had talked their client out of worse situations before. They requested a meeting. Jinza's legal team sent back a document instead, a counterclaim that was, by any measure, thorough. Every incident of documented racial aggravation in the waiting room. Chidinma's hospital records from the bruising on her shoulder. The impact report on Mercy's lower back. The stress assessment done on the baby after the incident. All of it dated, time-stamped, witnessed. Daniel's lead lawyer read through it in the meeting room and then excused himself to call his client. The call lasted 8 minutes. Daniel came out of it quieter than he'd been since the paper cut. His family arrived on the 3rd day. His wife first, a small, carefully dressed woman who looked like she had been managing her husband's consequences for long enough that it no longer surprised her, only tired her. She asked to speak to Mercy directly. Mercy agreed. They sat across from each other in a small consultation room, no lawyers present, just the two of them. "I'm sorry," Daniel's wife said. She looked at Mercy's stomach when she said it. "Not on his behalf. On my own. I am sorry that happened to you and your baby and your friend. I am sorry that nobody stopped him sooner." Mercy looked at her for a long time. "Have you seen the footage?" "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." Mercy nodded. "Then you know it wasn't only that day." He walked into a room full of pregnant women and decided immediately what they were worth based on how they looked. That didn't start with the paper cut. That's who he is when he thinks nobody's watching. Daniel's wife looked at her hands. "I know," she said quietly. Mercy leaned forward slightly. "Your apology means something to me. His doesn't yet." Apologies from people who only regret consequences aren't the same as apologies from people who regret what they actually did. The woman across from her nodded slowly, the nod of someone hearing the truth of something they'd been living with for years. Daniel himself came on the fourth day. Not with lawyers. Not with his board credentials, or his donation history, or the armor of entitled confidence he'd walked into the clinic with 6 days earlier. He came alone, wearing a plain jacket, looking like a man who had spent 4 days in the uncomfortable company of his own reflection. Mercy and Ginza received him together. Daniel looked at Ginza, and then looked at Mercy, and then back at Ginza, as if still recalculating something he couldn't fully resolve. "I want to apologize," he said. It came out stiff, rehearsed, the words of a man still learning the shape of accountability. "What I said and did was wrong. The things I said about your wife and her friend, about who belongs in that building, I was wrong. Completely wrong." "What specifically were you wrong about?" Ginza said. Daniel paused. "About them not belonging there. Because of the ownership. Or because you understand now that it was wrong regardless?" The silence lasted long enough to be its own answer. "Both," Daniel said finally, though the order in which he'd listed them had already told the room something. Mercy spoke then, quietly and directly. "I have worked in that clinic for 3 years. I have sat with women at their worst moments. I have held hands through losses and celebrated with families through miracles. My husband has owned the building for 8 months. Neither of those things is what gives me the right to be there." She held his gaze. "Being a person is what gives me the right to be there. That's it. That's the whole answer." Daniel looked at the floor. "I understand that," he responded. "I hope you do," she said. "Because I forgive you. Not for your sake. For mine. I refuse to carry what you did into the rest of this pregnancy." The case was settled 6 weeks later. The terms were Ginza's, proposed through his legal team, and not negotiated down from. A formal public apology, read by Daniel Show's own mouth in the presence of the clinic staff. A significant financial contribution to a maternal health fund specifically serving Black women in the city, a fund established in Mercy's name, managed independently. And 3 years of mandatory unconscious bias training for every board member connected to Daniel Show's investment group, independently verified. Daniel's lawyers tried twice to negotiate the public apology into a private one. Ginza's response both times was the same document with the same terms unchanged. The apology happened on a Tuesday morning in the clinic's main lobby. Daniel stood in front of the staff and read what he had written, haltingly, in the presence of nurses and doctors and patients and 2 police officers and Annie Fong, who stood at the back with her thermos and her reading glasses and watched with the expression of a woman filing something permanently into memory. When it was over, Chidinma, standing beside Mercy, leaned close and whispered. He read it like a student giving a presentation he hadn't studied for. "He probably hadn't," Mercy whispered back. "Do you feel better?" Mercy thought about it. "I feel like it happened the way it should have. That's different from better, but it's enough." 7 weeks after that, in a private suite on the clinic's 6th floor, Mercy held her daughter for the first time. She was small and warm and perfect, with a full head of dark hair and a cry that immediately filled the room with its own specific announcement of existence. Ginza sat beside the bed with his chair pulled as close as it would go, one hand holding Mercy's, his other hand resting at the edge of the blanket, not quite touching the baby yet, like he was giving himself a moment to understand that she was real. "She's here," Mercy said. She's here, he agreed. He pressed his mouth to Mercy's temple, staying there for a long moment, and she felt the exhale of it. The full, complete release of every hard thing that had led to this room. For years, she said quietly. For years, he said. And worth every single one. He looked at his daughter then, really looked, and his face did the thing it almost never did in any room with any other person. It simply opened, all the quiet control of him set entirely aside, leaving just a man looking at a miracle he had waited for with his whole heart. Andy Fong knocked and entered without waiting for an answer, carrying a small arrangement of flowers she had clearly bought herself, wearing her reading glasses and her lanyard, and a smile that took up her whole face. I came to see her, she announced. Nobody invited you, Andy Fong, Mercy said. I have worked in this building for 11 years, Andy Fong said, setting the flowers on the windowsill and peering at the baby with complete authority. I invite myself. They laughed. She looked at the baby for a long moment. Then she looked at Mercy. Then at Jinza. She has your eyes, she told Jinza. She has her mother's everything else, he said. Auntie Fong nodded once, deeply satisfied, poured herself tea from her thermos into a small cup she had also brought herself, and sat in the corner chair like she planned to stay for a while. Nobody asked her to leave. Downstairs, in an office that was no longer his, Daniel Show's nameplate had been removed from the board roster. The $4 million remained where it had always been, in the clinic, in the walls, in the equipment, doing the work it was always supposed to do, entirely indifferent to the name of the man who had given it, which was exactly as it should be. Some people walk into rooms and decide immediately who belongs and who doesn't. This story isn't about the money or the ownership or who turned out to have more power. It's about the woman who showed up every day for 4 years, doing her job with grace, loving her patients, building a life worth living, and who never once needed anyone's permission to belong exactly where she was. The quietest people in the room are never the weakest. They're just the ones who haven't decided to move yet. So always be kind. The end.